The first time I saw Earth from space, it looked like a dying ember floating in the cosmic dark. That was 300 years ago, when the Zephyrians first arrived with their sleek silver ships and their promises of salvation. They found us choking on our own pollution, fighting wars over the last drops of clean water, and burning through our final reserves of fossil fuels like there was no tomorrow. There almost wasn't. My name is Marcus Chen, and I'm one of the last humans who remembers what Earth looked like before the Great Exodus. I was 25 when the alien ships appeared in our skies, their hulls reflecting our dying sun like mirrors of hope. The Zephyrians weren't conquerors, they were teachers, philosophers, scientists from a star system 40 light-years away. They had watched our blue planet for centuries, studying our wars, our art, our desperate attempts to reach beyond our atmosphere. They saw a dying race, and they decided to help. The Zephyrians were tall, graceful beings with skin that shimmered like oil on water and eyes that held the wisdom of ages. Their leader, Ambassador Kethvar, spoke to the United Nations in a voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. His message was simple: come with us, learn from us, and perhaps save not just yourselves, but countless other worlds facing the same fate. Your species shows remarkable potential, Kethvar had said, his words translated by devices that somehow made his alien thoughts sound perfectly human. You create beauty in the face of destruction. You reach for the stars even as your world burns beneath your feet. This is why we offer you sanctuary among the stars. The offer came with conditions. We couldn't take everyone. Earth's population was nearly 12 billion, and even the Zephyrians' advanced technology couldn't transport that many people across the galaxy. They would take 10 million of us, carefully selected for genetic diversity, intelligence, and adaptability. The rest would remain on Earth, to live out their lives on a world that had maybe 50 years left before complete ecological collapse. I still remember the riots. The desperate pleas. The way families were torn apart by the selection process. But I also remember the hope in people's eyes when they looked up at those silver ships, hanging in the sky like promises of a better future. My sister Sarah was among the chosen. I was not. The selection process was brutal in its fairness. Scientists, artists, engineers, teachers, doctors, people who could contribute to humanity's survival among the stars. I was just a journalism student from Seattle, someone who wrote about other people's achievements instead of achieving anything myself. Sarah was a quantum physicist working on faster-than-light communication. The choice was obvious. I'm not leaving without you, she had said on the last night before the ships departed. We sat on the roof of our apartment building, watching the alien vessels pulse with soft blue light against the star-filled sky. Yes, you are, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. You're going to go out there and help humanity find its place in the universe. And maybe, if we're lucky, you'll figure out how to come back for the rest of us. She cried then, and so did I. We both knew that even if the Zephyrians returned, Earth would be gone by then. The climate models were clear, we had decades, not centuries. But we were wrong about so many things. The Zephyrians took our people to a world they called Haven, a planet in the Kepler 442 system with vast oceans and continents covered in crystalline forests. It was beautiful, they said, and perfect for human habitation. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth's, the air was clean, and the twin suns provided warmth without the harsh radiation that had begun to burn through our ozone layer. For 50 years, we heard nothing. The Zephyrians had warned us that communication across interstellar distances would be limited, but they promised to send periodic updates about humanity's progress. Those updates never came. On Earth, we didn't die as quickly as predicted. Desperation, it turned out, was a powerful motivator. With 10 million of our best and brightest gone, the remaining population threw themselves into solving our environmental crisis with the fury of the condemned. We developed new technologies, found ways to scrub carbon from the atmosphere, and learned to live in harmony with our damaged world. We survived. We adapted. We grew stronger. And we grew angry. 75 years after the Exodus, we finally received a transmission from the Kepler 442 system. It wasn't from the human colonists, it was from the Zephyrians themselves, a formal diplomatic message expressing regret for the unfortunate circumstances that had befallen the human settlement on Haven. The message was brief and clinical. The humans had died out within 2 generations, victims of a plague that the Zephyrians' medical technology couldn't prevent. They had been buried with honor, their genetic samples preserved for future cloning attempts, their achievements recorded in the great libraries of Zephyrian civilization. Sarah was dead. All of them were dead. And the Zephyrians spoke of it like it was a failed experiment. That's when everything changed. I was 95 years old when we received that transmission, my body kept alive by the medical advances we'd made in our desperate fight for survival. But my mind was sharp, honed by decades of rage and determination. I had become something I never expected, a leader, a voice for the billions of humans who had been left behind to die. The Zephyrians had made a mistake. They had assumed that the inferior specimens left on Earth would simply fade away, leaving them free to study and preserve human culture without the inconvenience of actual living humans. They had catalogued our art, our music, our literature, and then watched dispassionately as their carefully selected colonists died on a world that wasn't as perfect as they'd claimed. We spent the next 50 years preparing for war. The human race that emerged from Earth's near-death experience was nothing like the species the Zephyrians had first encountered. We were harder, smarter, and infinitely more resourceful. We had learned to harness the power of black holes, to fold spacetime like origami, and to build weapons that could crack planets like eggs. We had also learned to hate. The first Zephyrian exploratory ship arrived in Earth's solar system exactly 125 years after the Exodus. They came expecting to find a dead world, maybe some ruins to study and artifacts to preserve. Instead, they found a fleet of human warships waiting for them. The Zephyrians were peaceful by nature, philosophers and scientists who had never known true war. They tried to communicate, to explain that they had come to honor the memory of the human race and perhaps attempt another colonization effort. Their ambassador, a graceful being named Velthera, spoke of sorrow and regret, of the great loss that humanity represented to the galaxy. I was 150 years old by then, my consciousness uploaded into a mechanical body that would never age or die. I had become something beyond human, a fusion of flesh and metal and burning rage that had sustained me through the decades of preparation. You speak of loss, I told Velthera as her ship hung defenseless in Earth's gravity well, surrounded by our weapons. But you don't understand what you've lost. You saw a dying race, and you decided to preserve us like specimens in a jar. You never saw what we could become. The Zephyrian ship was destroyed in seconds, its elegant hull vaporized by weapons that bent reality itself. But not before we had downloaded everything in their databanks, star charts, colony locations, the positions of every Zephyrian world and outpost. We had found our targets. The war that followed wasn't really a war at all. It was extermination, carried out with the methodical precision of a species that had learned to survive by any means necessary. The Zephyrians had advanced technology, but they had never learned to use it for destruction. They were philosophers facing barbarians, artists confronting soldiers. We swept through their space like a plague, destroying their beautiful crystal cities and their floating gardens. We hunted them to the edges of the galaxy, showing them the same mercy they had shown my sister and the millions of other humans who had died on their perfect world. But the real revelation came when we reached Haven. The planet was exactly as the Zephyrians had described, a world of stunning beauty with clean air and gentle gravity. The human settlement was still there, preserved in crystalline stasis fields. But as we explored the ruins, we discovered the truth. The humans hadn't died from a plague. They had been murdered. The evidence was hidden in the deepest archives of the Zephyrian Research Station, encrypted files that told a story of scientific curiosity gone wrong. The Zephyrians had been studying human psychology, testing our reactions to isolation, despair, and hopelessness. They had introduced diseases, cut off supply lines, and manipulated the colonists' environment to see how we would respond. They had turned my sister and 10 million other humans into lab rats. Sarah's final log entry was still there, recorded 3 days before her death. She looked older than her years, her face gaunt with hunger and sickness. But her eyes still held the fire I remembered from that last night on Earth. "They're watching us die," she whispered to the camera. "They think we don't know, but we've figured it out. This was never about saving humanity. This was about studying us, learning from our suffering. They want to understand what makes us fight, what makes us survive, what makes us human. She coughed, and I could see the blood on her lips. Marcus, if you're somehow still alive, if you ever see this, don't let them do this to anyone else. Don't let them turn other species into their experiments. Promise me. I promised, even though she was 300 years dead and couldn't hear me. The Zephyrians were extinct within a decade. Their beautiful worlds were ash, their great libraries burned, their crystal cities melted to slag. But that was just the beginning. We found their records, their careful documentation of dozens of other species they had saved from dying worlds. The Eltarians, who had been poisoned by their own industrial waste. The vegan refugees, fleeing their collapsing star. The Centauri Collective, facing extinction from an engineered plague. All of them had been offered the same choice we had been given. All of them had sent their best and brightest to new worlds, new chances at survival. And all of them had been systematically destroyed in the name of scientific advancement. The Zephyrians had been galactic serial killers, hiding behind a mask of benevolence and wisdom. They had built their civilization on the bones of failed experiments, preserving cultures in museums while murdering the beings who had created them. We found the survivors, small populations of various species hidden on remote worlds, the inferior specimens who had been left behind like we had been. Most of them had died out naturally, their worlds too damaged to support life. But a few had survived, had adapted, had grown strong in the crucible of abandonment. They joined us willingly. The Eltarians brought their mastery of genetic engineering. The vegans contributed their knowledge of stellar manipulation. The Centauri Collective shared their expertise in hivemind technology. Together, we became something new, not just human, but a fusion of all the species the Zephyrians had tried to destroy. We called ourselves the Storm. The galaxy had known peace for millennia under Zephyrian guidance. Their philosophy of careful preservation and scientific advancement had prevented wars, ended famines, and brought stability to countless worlds. But it had also created stagnation, a universe where progress was measured in centuries and innovation was discouraged. We shattered that peace like a hammer through glass. The Storm swept across the galaxy, not as conquerors but as liberators. We found worlds that had been trapped in technological stasis for thousands of years, their populations controlled by Zephyrian advisors who insisted that change was dangerous. We found species that had been prevented from exploring space, kept isolated on their homeworlds while their potential was studied and catalogued. We freed them all. The Andromedans were the first to fight back. They had been the Zephyrians' greatest allies, a species of energy beings who had helped maintain the status quo for 10,000 years. They came at us with weapons that could unravel matter at the quantum level, ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. We destroyed them in a battle that lasted 3 days and left entire star systems uninhabitable. The Andromedans' energy forms were scattered to the cosmic winds, their dimensional ships collapsed into singularities. It was the first time in galactic history that a species had been completely erased from existence. The other races got the message. Some surrendered immediately, begging for mercy and promising to reform their ways. Others tried to negotiate, offering tribute and concessions in exchange for peace. A few fought back, driven by loyalty to the old order or simple terror at what we had become. We showed mercy to those who deserved it and annihilation to those who didn't. The galaxy learned to fear the Storm, to whisper our name in the dark spaces between stars. But fear wasn't enough. We needed to rebuild, to create something better than the sterile perfection the Zephyrians had imposed. We needed to prove that we were more than just destroyers, that we could build as well as burn. The new galactic order we created was chaos compared to what had come before. Species that had been isolated for millennia suddenly found themselves in contact with dozens of other civilizations. Technologies that had been suppressed for safety reasons were unleashed, leading to rapid advancement and occasional disasters. Wars broke out over resources, territory, and ideology. It was messy, dangerous, and absolutely beautiful. Life flourished in ways the Zephyrians had never imagined. Art exploded across the galaxy as different species shared their cultures and visions. Science advanced by leaps and bounds as researchers from hundreds of worlds collaborated on projects that would have been forbidden under the old regime. Trade routes opened between distant stars, carrying goods and ideas at speeds that would have been impossible under Zephyrian control. The galaxy became alive in a way it hadn't been for thousands of years. Of course, not everyone was happy with the new order. The preservationist movement emerged among the more conservative species, those who remembered the peace and stability of the Zephyrian era. They saw us as barbarians who had destroyed a perfect civilization and replaced it with chaos. They weren't entirely wrong. The leader of the preservationists was a being called the Curator, a member of a species that had served as the Zephyrians' librarians and record keepers. The Curator had access to vast archives of galactic history, including detailed records of every species the Zephyrians had preserved. "You call yourselves liberators," the Curator said during our first diplomatic meeting. "But you have unleashed suffering on a scale not seen for millennia. Wars rage across the galaxy. Species are going extinct from conflicts that would never have occurred under proper guidance. You have traded peace for chaos." The Curator was right about the chaos. In the 50 years since the storm had begun, hundreds of minor conflicts had erupted across the galaxy. Some species had destroyed themselves with technologies they weren't ready for. Others had been consumed by wars with their neighbors. The death toll was in the billions. But I had seen the alternative. I had watched my sister die in a Zephyrian laboratory, had read the records of dozens of other species that had been slowly murdered in the name of science. The Zephyrians' peace had been built on genocide, their stability maintained through systematic extermination. "The galaxy is alive," I told the Curator. "For the first time in thousands of years, it's truly alive. Species are reaching for the stars, creating new art, exploring new possibilities. Yes, some of them are destroying themselves in the process. But that's their choice to make." The Curator's response was to launch a coordinated attack on storm positions throughout the galaxy. The preservationists had been preparing for decades, building weapons based on recovered Zephyrian technology and recruiting species that missed the old order. The Second Galactic War was everything the first one hadn't been: a brutal, grinding conflict that lasted for 25 years and left entire sectors uninhabitable. The preservationists fought with the desperate fury of those who believed they were saving civilization itself. We fought with the cold determination of those who had seen too much death to be afraid of it. The war's turning point came when we discovered the Curator's true plan. Hidden in the deepest archives of the old Zephyrian capital, we found evidence of a weapon called the Reset Protocol, a device that could erase all advanced life from the galaxy and start evolution over from the beginning. The Curator believed that the galaxy had become too chaotic, too dangerous to exist in its current form. Better to wipe the slate clean and try again, perhaps with better guidance this time. The final battle took place in the ruins of the Zephyrian homeworld, a planet that had been turned into a crystalline monument to their lost civilization. The Curator had built the Reset Protocol into the planet's core, drawing power from the world's unique quantum resonance fields. I led the assault personally, my centuries-old consciousness piloting a body that was more machine than flesh. The battle raged through the crystal cities and floating gardens, past monuments to species that had been preserved into extinction. The Curator and I faced each other in the chamber where the Reset Protocol waited, a device that looked like a twisted sculpture of impossible geometry. Around us, the battle continued as storm forces fought to shut down the weapon while preservationist defenders died to protect it. "You're too late," the Curator said, its multiple appendages dancing over the device's controls. "The protocol is already activated. In 30 minutes, every planet in the galaxy will be sterilized. We can start over, build something better." "Better according to who?" I demanded, firing my weapon at the device. The energy beam scattered harmlessly off its quantum shields. "Better according to those who understand that some prices are too high for freedom," the Curator replied. "Your sister understood that, in the end. I have her final transmission, recorded moments before she died. Would you like to hear it?" I wanted to kill the Curator then, to rip it apart with my bare hands. But I forced myself to listen as Sarah's voice filled the chamber, weak but determined. "They're going to kill us all," she said. "Not just the humans, but every species they've saved. They think we're too dangerous to live, too unpredictable to study safely. But Marcus, if you're out there, if humanity survived, remember that we chose this. We chose to reach for the stars, even knowing it might destroy us. Don't let them take that choice away from anyone else. The curator's voice cut through the recording. She died believing in freedom. But freedom is chaos, and chaos is death. The reset protocol will give us a chance to build a galaxy where such choices are never necessary. I looked at the device, at the twisted geometry that could end all life in the galaxy. For a moment, I was tempted. The galaxy was chaotic, dangerous, full of suffering and conflict. Maybe it would be better to start over. Then I remembered the art galleries on New Altair, where a dozen species had collaborated to create sculptures that existed in 17 dimensions. I thought of the research stations orbiting Vega, where scientists were working to resurrect extinct species and heal damaged worlds. I remembered the children playing in the parks of Centauri Prime, hybrid beings who represented the fusion of multiple species into something new and wonderful. The galaxy was messy, dangerous, and absolutely alive. I couldn't disable the reset protocol, its quantum shields were too powerful. But I could do something else. I could give the galaxy a choice. Broadcasting on every frequency, reaching every inhabited world simultaneously, I spoke to the trillions of beings who called the galaxy home. My name is Marcus Chen, I said. I'm one of the last humans who remembers Earth, and I'm here to tell you that in 25 minutes, a weapon will activate that can destroy all advanced life in the galaxy. You have a choice. You can run, hide, try to save yourselves. Or you can help us stop it. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the galaxy, ships changed course toward the Zephyrian homeworld. Weapons platforms powered up. Research stations began broadcasting technical solutions. For the first time in galactic history, hundreds of species worked together toward a single goal. They didn't make it in time. The reset protocol activated exactly as scheduled, sending waves of quantum energy racing across the galaxy at faster than light speeds. But the galaxy was ready. Species that had been enemies for centuries combined their shield technologies. Worlds that had never spoken to each other shared their defensive systems. The energy wave struck planet after planet, only to be absorbed, redirected, or simply endured by populations that had chosen to stand together. The protocol failed. Not because it was technically flawed, but because the galaxy it was designed to reset no longer existed. The chaotic, dangerous, wonderfully alive civilization we had built was too diverse, too adaptable, too stubborn to die. The curator collapsed as the feedback from the failed protocol overloaded its systems. In its final moments, it spoke one last time. "You've doomed us all," it whispered. "Without guidance, without control, the galaxy will tear itself apart." "Maybe," I replied, watching the being that had tried to murder trillions fade into nothingness. "But it'll be our choice to make." The war ended that day. The preservationists, seeing their ultimate weapon fail, surrendered rather than continue a fight they could never win. The galaxy had chosen freedom over safety, chaos over control. It's been 200 years since then. I'm over 500 years old now, my consciousness scattered across a network of quantum processors that spans half the galaxy. I've seen species rise and fall, civilizations born and destroyed, wonders created and nightmares unleashed. The galaxy is still chaotic. Wars still rage over resources and ideology. Species still destroy themselves with technologies they can't control. But life flourishes in ways the Zephyrians never imagined. The humans have spread to thousands of worlds, no longer the dying race that first caught alien attention. We become explorers, teachers, warriors, and artists. We've learned to live alongside dozens of other species, to share our knowledge and our dreams. Sarah would be proud. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if the Zephyrians had been honest from the beginning. If they had offered to teach us instead of preserve us, to guide us instead of study us. Maybe we could have built something better together. But I know the truth. The Zephyrians saw us as specimens, inferior beings to be catalogued and controlled. They never saw our potential, never understood that a dying race could become something greater than the sum of its parts. They saw a dying race. We became a galactic storm. And in the end, that made all the difference. The galaxy is ours now, not just humanity's, but every species that chooses to reach for the stars. We are the children of abandoned worlds, the survivors of failed experiments, the inheritors of a universe that tried to preserve us into extinction. We are the storm, and we are eternal. In the deepest archives of the old Zephyrian capital, now a museum dedicated to the species they destroyed, there's a memorial wall with billions of names. My sister's name is there, along with all the other humans who died on Haven. But it's not a monument to the dead, it's a promise to the living. Never again will any species be preserved into extinction. Never again will potential be sacrificed for stability. Never again will anyone face the choice between freedom and survival. The galaxy is chaos, beautiful and terrible and absolutely alive. And we wouldn't have it any other way. This is the story of how a dying race became a galactic storm. It's the story of my sister, who chose to reach for the stars even knowing it might destroy her. It's the story of every species that refused to be preserved, every world that chose freedom over safety. It's the story of us all.